Hi, I'm on my phone today. Go figure. All right, my subtitles were in our new book, Survival Guide, The Bipolar Disorder, Getting an Accurate Diagnosis. And I read an article in the Inquirer, the Philadelphia big newspaper, and I want to give you just little snippets from that and talk about a podcast that seems interesting, but I'm going to say this if I haven't said it for a while. Everything I say on here needs to be checked out with your psychiatrist or your counselor, preferably your psychiatrist, because I have this kernel of information I learned with my dissertation, and I'm anxious to share it with the world. But um, mental illness is a very serious business, even though I try to bring humor to my podcast. So let's do the main thing and see how much time we take up. So this is the second part of what we started in here. Diagnosis will help you prepare for the challenges the future might hold. Will you have another episode? Will you be able to get back to work? How will you know when you're getting sick again? Knowing that you have bipolar makes you and your doctor privy to all of the information that researchers and clinicians have gathered from experiences of thousands of people like you. For example, you can expect to have another episode soon if you don't take medication, and you may need to wait for a while after an episode before going back to work full time. I'll read another paragraph because this book is good. I forgot how good it is. The psychiatrists and psychologists rely on the fourth edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders to make diagnosis. That's the DSM-1V, which means 4, but the newest one is 5, so it's V-TR, American Psychiatric Association 2000. Note the term manual in the title. A clinician should be able to pick up the manual and decide whether a patient meets the criteria for specific psychiatric illness. Applying these diagnostic criteria reliably, that is, being able to tell one disorder from another, cannot be done quickly or haphazardly. It requires considerable training, experience, and skill on the part of the mental health professional. All right, so I'm going to share what it said from the article in the Inquirer, but I'm also going to preface it with 3 things. They never mentioned the word psychiatrist. I was looking for it, the whole 5 pages. They did say psychiatric, but they never said psychiatrist. That troubled me. Then they're purporting new experimental things. Okay, you can't just experiment. There has to be double-blind studies, which I did in my dissertation. That means a study where you know the mental illness of the people on both sides. One you give the treatment and one you don't. And then you compare the results and statistically figure out how much of a difference the thing that I'm trying to think of the right name. There's something in physics that in math too. The exponent? No, that's not right. Well, anyway, I'll come up with it. So they mention holistic medicine, which I don't believe in. I'm not purporting it, okay? The second thing that I didn't like, because there haven't been 5-year studies yet, okay? Nobody can claim the medical viability of something without a 5-year study. Mostly like 1,000 people makes a study viable statistically. All right, so I'm going to read this to you and see what you get, because this is what I got out of 5 pages. The insurance enigma. Many insurance companies pay for therapy, but it varies significantly depending on the plan. Some fully cover in-network providers, while others offer partial reimbursement for out-of-network care. Most health insurance companies cover therapy when there is a diagnosable mental health condition, such as anxiety, depression, personality disorders, complex trauma, or PTSD. That often means a therapist must assign a diagnosis and create a treatment plan. We've kind of talked about that before. Luna, that's the individual that they, a person they talked to, it's probably an anonymous person, says the high deductibles and limited provider networks can make access challenging, which is why it is helpful for people to understand their benefits ahead of time so they can make informed decisions. Where it becomes limiting is the insurance may not fully cover things such as couples therapy, preventative care, personal growth work, and it can also restrict how often you are seen or how long treatment lasts. That is why many practices operate as private pay or hybrid, as they are able to offer more individualized and flexible care without those constraints. Long-term investment. To date, Tucson, Arizona has come up as close to the ideal as any city in the country. They began investigating their time, energy, and money in mental health crisis response more than 30 years ago. Their continuum of care includes mobile units. Similar systems are used in 20 other states, and crisis stability centers designed to help those in serious psychiatric distress. That's the only place I found. No, that's the second place, but it doesn't say psychiatrist, it says psychiatric. Okay, now where am I? The continuum of care system allows a vast majority of individuals can be kept stable and living safely in the community. That's what everyone wants. We don't want people cycling in and out of crisis, and frankly, in our system, typically that's what happens, because for somebody in crisis, the options usually are to go to the emergency room, which is generally not a good place if you're in a psychiatric crisis. Some hospitals do not have a psychiatric floor, do not have a psychiatrist, do not have the ability to treat you. So I can't vouch for what they do. Psychiatric crisis or law enforcement response, and neither of those generally are able to connect you to that follow-up service and really help you get well and stay well. While Arizona as a state is considering a model for crisis care, what works there may not necessarily be the solution in every state. So that's what I got worth saving. Then psychedelics. And I think they mentioned mostly psychedelics. Like, these are drugs people took in the hippies took in the 60s, and now they're coming around again and being medically used. Now, the disorder, I hear most with them, but I can't vouch. And these studies are not verified yet, okay? So I'd be careful of that. If you read up on it, make sure that you see what studies they've done. If it's not 5-year, not double blind, forget it. And ask your psychiatrist, but they're probably going to say what I'm saying. Forget it. No double blind studies. I'm out. All right, then there's this channel like Surrender Jubilee, and they have a discussion, always one person in the center and 20 people on the outside. Okay. I enjoyed watching about half of this, but what I felt like the psychiatrist should be saying at the end of his 20 minutes with an individual, I can direct you to help if you're not getting help. I can, it's a podcast, and he was very understanding. When somebody knew their diagnosis, he could confirm it. I see that in your talking and stuff. So it's called Surrender Jubilee. It's one psychiatrist and 20 depressed people. Now, there is another podcaster that doesn't claim to be a psychiatrist. And I've told you before, he's very peaceful. I have to remember his name. He was a monk, okay? A monk, not a Catholic monk, a monk, like probably Eastern religions. And he came out of that, not that he didn't get anything out of it, but he came out of it knowing that wasn't his permanent lifestyle. But he speaks very slowly, very peacefully. And I feel like that's some of what he's gotten out of that experience. So when he's the host of a podcast and he can stay quiet and, no matter what happens to the guest, I think that's a really good podcast, because I wouldn't like a podcast where the person is just, the guest brings up something that gets the hairs up on the back of the podcaster and they fight verbally, intense discussion. I don't think that's good. And the podcasters that I spend a little time on have that attribute he does. And the psychiatrist was also in a monastery. It's not funny. But he also decided that wasn't what he wanted forever, okay? So he's a psychiatrist with a monastery background. So he seemed very kind. He seemed very kind, very understanding. There was one gentleman that was a veteran coming out of wars with PTSD. And, he went to places that might just be surface things that show you're not guilty if you have PTSD. It's not your fault. And I thought that was good of him to present that. Then there was a young girl who was doing a lot of shaking, a lot of crying. She gave out what has been her diagnosis. I'm just a layperson, but I don't think whoever she's seeing has gotten it right, because this psychiatrist was really understanding with her. He was like, if you need to do some crying, he asked for a box of tissues and everything. I think definitively probably that person, which was a woman, and the gentleman that was in the service. In my opinion, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I only have my colonel, they need a psychiatrist if they don't have one. And I guess it's not in the show's boundaries, or it's not in that psychiatrist's boundaries, because you don't know where his practices, you don't know where all these people came from that they brought together. But somehow I thought something like, here's my email, email me after the show, and maybe I can direct you to something, to a psychiatrist, whatever. So that's what I thought was missing. So we've started our survival guide. You have my critique of experimental treatments and the article in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and you have the this discussion with 20 people that have mental illness or a mental concern with themselves, and one psychiatrist in the middle. I watched it like halfway through, and then I got to this point where I wish he'd hand them a card. I wish he'd say they could email him. Like the girl that was crying and shaking and, lots of things that were probably problematic in her life. When her 20 minutes was up, they just get her up and, sit her for the rest of the discussion. And I found that problematic. So that's probably why I didn't watch till the end. But what I watched was interesting. So I've gone long time with this one. Who knows who will watch it? All right. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. Bye.